Although we've come to the end of the trail, hockey mask, deadly tale, counselors scream, it's a bloody scene. Jason's gotta kill all of those teens. Hey, Internet. By the way, you're welcome for those soothing tones. It's one of the many services that I provide.
Coach said it's all right to bleed from the ears.
I can't believe it, baby video producer. We made it through 11 movies and we were finally able to work out the rules for getting out of a Friday the 13th movie alive. You know, aside from the main rule, don't go to Crystal Lake, but we have to have movies, so let's ignore that, just like Halloween and Nightmare on Elm Street ignore the rules, don't go to Haddonfield and Springwood respectively. So what ended up being the deadliest laws? Well, hold on to your butts and let's recap the rules for surviving the Friday the 13th franchise. Breaking news! As a special surprise, I also have a new rule. I've been holding this one back for a few episodes because I want to introduce one last rule in the recap video, but we'll get to that shortly. We're going to start from the least broken rule and work our way up to the top, but for every rule I'm going to give a memorable kill from the series that a character broke resulting in their demise, and just to make things harder for myself, I'm going to include one rule violation from each and every movie. So enough fluffing around, let's go. Coming in at number 12 with one instance of being broken, sins carry over. This is a somewhat controversial rule as this only really applies to one character, Alice. While Sunrun and KM flirt with crossing the line, and in my humble opinion, Clay and definitely Tommy do break it as well when it comes to final survivors. The difference is that Alice is the only one who reappears in a film after committing the sins when she shows back up in part 2. So for all you Tommy and Supernatural fans out there just hoping that your favorite character does show up for the inevitable sequel, just be careful because their past will definitely catch up with them. At number 11, being broken on 4 occasions, we have rule number 8, be nice to animals. This rule gives a bit of credence to the idea that Jason is not all evil, as he will have his vengeance on anyone that harms his friends from the world of wildlife. Let's jump all the way back to part 1, where Bill decides to be the supreme jerk face when he takes a machete to a perfectly harmless bull snake. And what fate ultimately falls on Bill for hurting an animal? Why, a grisly death hanging from a door with a fuck ton of arrows driven into him. Which makes one wonder, who is the ultimate defender of the animal kingdom, Jason or John Wick? Answers on a postcard with who you want avenging your precious muffin. Trudging ahead, number 10 brings us to rule 2, do not hitchhike, on our list to surviving a Friday the 13th movie with 5 violations. Now we all know no one rides for free.
Fine. Ass, gas, or grass.
So if none of those options sound appealing to you, then you're just going to have to pay for your ride in another way. Death! Just like Alexis, Deborah, and Luke from part 9 had to find out when they hitched a ride to Camp Crystal Lake. Jason went the extra mile as well, catching 2 of them in the act, having sexy time, just inciting his fury to split a bitch in half levels. So everyone, if you must go to Crystal Lake, be sure to keep your thumb in your pocket and just catch an Uber. From this point on, all of the rules have double-digit infractions, so let's move on to our 9th most broken rule, number 11, stay off the dance floor with 10 transgressions. Now, while my personal choice for Friday Crush is Violet from part 5 with her sick-ass dance moves, just let's be honest with each other, if we're talking about dancing in a Friday the 13th movie, there's only one scene that everyone wants to see. So once again, here it is in all of its glory. Enjoy these sweet-ass moves from Mr. Crispin Glover. Jason had to have suffered some sort of dance-related humiliation with his over-the-top brutal treatment of Jimmy, which, if I ever do a top 10 Jason kill countdown, definitely is going to make the list.
Hey! Ted! Ted! Hey, Ted, where the hell's the corkscrew?
Hopefully Jason will forgive our dancing ways for this next one, as it's time to celebrate our last new rule, number 12, hold it in, which clocked in at 10 times broken as well.
Dad, I'm prairie dogging it.
What the hell does that mean?
Now the seeds for this one started way back in part 1 with Marcy when she had to visit the loo. Over the course of the franchise, we had Harold in part 3, Pete in part 5, Michael in part 7, and Alexis and Deborah from Jason Goes to Hell all having to excuse themselves to answer the call of nature. What ultimately made me convinced to have this as a new rule? Well, it would be the deaths of Officer Mark and Brian from part 9 when they are clearly seen exiting the restroom, with it being safe to assume they had both just done their business. Now back in the rules video for part 9, I told a little white lie fib joke about them having sexy time so I could preserve keeping one last rule to introduce for this video, so internet, I beg your forgiveness. So choosing a death for this rule ultimately came down to 2 choices, and while I definitely had some love in my heart for ooh baby, I have to go with Chuck from part 3, who gave the most memorable visit to the facilities.
Heavy shit.
Moving on to 7 in our countdown, we have rule number 7, if you're an authority, don't be a dick, with 14 different authority figures being assholes. Now while movies are a chocolate block full of authority figures who deserve some comeuppance,
Don't mess with the bull, young man. You'll get the horns.
Jason certainly always made sure anyone who took advantage of their position of power paid the price, and for this rule we're going to venture back to part 6 and Sheriff Garris, whose asshole actions can be sort of understood with him mostly overbearingly trying to protect his daughter and community, but blatantly abused his powers when it came to dealing with Tommy, and the sheriff might actually have lived had he taken the time to listen to Jarvis, but Garris was a dick and got folded up like a cot for his actions. So if you find yourself in Crystal Lake as a cop or teacher or anyone with some degree of authority, maybe try and be 50% more sensitive.
Just how am I supposed to do that? Private horse's ass?
The 6th most often broken rule belongs to number 3. No one likes a clown, coming in at a solid 15 instances. Now we all have a debate on what is funny. Some people like the hijinks of Ethel,
You big dildo.
while others are more partial to the meta humor stylings of Martin.
Some folks have a strange idea of entertainment.
While comedy might be subjective, it is quite clear that Jason does not possess much of a funny bone, and for this rule, let's go back to Jason X and my personal favorite comedy character in the franchise, Lou, played by the incomparable character actor Boyd Banks.
What are you doing?
I've never seen so many dead hookers in all my life.
Lord knows I have.
While he had an off-screen death, we did get to see what remained of him after Jason was done tearing him to pieces after Lou uttered his last words, "Houston, we have a machete."
Waka waka!
Quickly moving on, pretending that didn't just happen, rule number 10, turn in your colors, with 25 violations at the 5th most broken rule on our countdown. This is a strange rule because while there are relatively few instances of it occurring, when it does, it involves a number of people, which is what catapulted it so high on this list. While this rule does involve a number of mainly insignificant characters, we're going to concentrate on a god among men. Few men have graced the silver screen delivering a performance that oozes charisma, machismo, and sex appeal.
He's undefeated. You know that?
Ah, Julius, my main man. Unfortunately, he formed a group to go after Jason, which led to his inevitable demise, but just like the true alpha leader of men, manly man he is, he went out in the most glorious of fashions.
Your best shot. Motherfucker.
As we approach the top of the list, we're getting down to what most would consider the Mount Rushmore of things that will get you killed in a horror movie. Coming in at number 4 with 27 instances of failing to comply with not drinking and to just stick with Shirley Temples. For this one, let's go back to Friday the 13th, the killing of a sacred liver with the death of Trent.
Dick.
Who got what was coming to him after enjoying some sweet, sweet alcohol. To be honest, when I'm making these videos, I'm usually having a drink or 12. I like the nightlife. I like to boogie. But when visiting Crystal Lake, though, one must simply keep these vices in check so you can live to get drunk another day.
To alcohol, the cause of and solution to all of life's problems.
At 3, the flip side of the coin to drinking is rule number 4, no hanging with puff, being broken 30 times. Obviously, I wanted to go with the ultimate Friday weed smokers, Chuck and Chili. Or maybe even Chewy, but I admittedly painted myself into a corner with this whole give an example from every movie nonsense and had to shoehorn in something for part 5, which despite the love I have for it, I still consider it to be possibly the weakest in the franchise. Come at me, internet. With that being said, let's look at Tina and Eddie, 2 unremarkable but passable characters who have fun enough deaths. But I'll be honest, the main reason I picked these 2 wasn't because of their wacky tobacco usage, but it's because to this day I'm still fascinated by the fact that Tina is played by actress Debbie Sue Voorhees, an actress with the last name Voorhees. I know it's been said to death, but in a Friday the 13th movie, seriously, am I the only one who's just totally captivated on why and how this happened? It's like Mike Myers in a Halloween movie or Diane Kruger in A Nightmare on Elm Street. She's a very pretty girl and does a fine job in the role. I simply fear this will be forever a top spinning in my mind that slowly makes me, I don't know.
Go crazy?
Don't mind if I do!
Can you tell I've been rewatching The Simpsons a lot lately? At number 2 is Rule 6, use your brain, that was broken 39 times. When talking about horror movies, a lot of the times we just have to accept that characters are going to make bad decisions. If a family didn't move into ominous homes, if characters didn't read Latin that they didn't understand, or vacationers didn't go swimming in known shark-infested waters, we wouldn't have a lot of great scary movies. Throw a rock in a scary movie and you're going to hit someone making a moronical decision. When I thought to myself, what is the worst decision in a Friday movie, immediately Rob from part 4 sprung to mind. In the early portions of the series, he's practically the only character who realizes what a threat Jason truly is. Yet everything he knows and the events of the movie, he still decides to venture into a dark basement armed with only a small pointy weapon that wouldn't slow down an unstoppable killing machine like Jason for a second. And what happened to Rob? I would not go down that basement in anything short wearing full medieval armor and a big fucking gun. Actually, no, I would never go down in that basement. You got what you deserved, Rob. Finally, it's time for number 1, the most broken rule in the Friday the 13th franchise. Drum roll, please. Who would have guessed rule number 1, keep it in your pants? No real shock here, as this was the runaway winner at 68 instances being broken, which totally makes sense because it is the crux of the franchise. Presumably, had Barry and Claudette not been screwing, Jason would not have drowned and scores of people would not have been murdered. This is the one rule that there is no wiggle room on. Engage in sexy time behavior anywhere in the general vicinity of Jason and it's gonna ping on his radar. Now when it comes to rule number 1, it is obvious that if you actually do the horizontal polka, you're gonna get speared, but Jason also has zero tolerance to sexy time adjacent behavior. Let's rewind to part 7 and Tina, who all but committed the actual deed of playing hide the sausage. Plus, like Trent before her, her death was just oh so satisfying.
Fuck you. No, fuck you both.
And once again, to be honest, I mainly picked this one because I painted myself into a corner and needed something from part 7 and Tina was the most memorable. But because I simply can't help myself and will include it any and every time I can, my original choice and favorite kill of the Friday the 13th franchise.
One more time.
Good God, that never ceases to satisfy me. Let's have one last look at the overall Friday's numbers, and keep in mind that I'm very lazy and usually drunk when I make these numbers, so they might not be entirely accurate at this point. But let's ignore my flaws and go on to the characters that were wrongfully taken, having broken no rules, or at least any ones that I could find. Admittedly, 3 of these characters, Boat Worker Jim, Sewer Guy, and Officer Ryan, all had very minimal screen time. George didn't have much more, but he came across as a very genuine sort, and Vicky from Part 9 gave serious final girl vibes and was badass despite being taken far too soon. Now that amounts to 5 out of 163, which is only 3%, and I don't know what percentage for horror movie serial murderers is acceptable killing perfectly innocent characters, but 3% seems pretty low. And so what have we learned from all this? Studying the rules and trying to abide by them is a fine method, but there's only one truly safe way to not have Jason's wrath brought down upon you. Just don't go to Crystal Lake. The vacation packages are cheap for a reason. Spend the extra $100 and spend your spring break at a location where the percentage of machete murders are not 3,000% higher than the rest of the national average. So unfortunately, until what feels like hell freezes over and we get another Friday the 13th movie, that's it. I'm both shocked and appreciative to all you fine folks who sat through all these rules videos, but please just remember, have fun storming the castle.